The digital timestamp glows red against the darkness. 2:11 a.m. A patrol cruiser sits motionless on the gravel shoulder, its engine humming to the Texas night air. No emergency lights, no sirens, just calculated silence outside a modest stucco home where a family sleeps, unaware they're being watched. The Ring camera captures everything, that tiny red LED pulsing like a digital heartbeat, recording what should never happen in America. A sheriff's deputy, sworn protect and serve, conducting what the official logs would later call a directed patrol. But directed by whom? And why this house? Why this family? 7 months earlier, the Sosa family believed in their local law enforcement. Pilar Sosa had even voted for Sheriff Langford, trusting his campaign promises about community safety. Her husband Mateo ran a small construction business. Their daughter Layla studied criminal justice at the community college, dreaming of making a difference in her hometown. They had no idea they were about to become targets of the very system meant to protect them. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. It's a true account of how trust becomes terror, how badges can become weapons, and how one family's fight for justice exposed corruption that reached the highest levels of county law enforcement. Have you ever wondered what happens when those sworn to protect become the very people you need protection from? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to True Crime Speaks, because some stories demand to be told, no matter how uncomfortable the truth might be. The nightmare was just beginning. In the heart of Ceniza County, Texas, where mesquite trees line dusty roads and everyone knows their neighbor's name, the Sosa family represented everything good about small-town America. Pilar Sosa had built her reputation as the community's fierce advocate, organizing food drives, volunteering at the school district, and always standing up for families who couldn't stand up for themselves. Her husband Mateo owned Sosa Construction, employing local workers and building homes that would shelter generations. Their daughter Layla was pursuing criminal justice studies, inspired by her mother's passion for fairness and her own dreams of reforming the system from within. For 23 years, Sheriff Brock Langford wore the badge in Ceniza County with what appeared to be unwavering dedication. Campaign posters still dotted local businesses, displaying his weathered face and the slogan, "Experience you can trust." The community had elected him 4 consecutive terms, believing in his promises of transparency and accountability. Deputy Quentin Hale served as Langford's right hand, a 12-year veteran whose personnel files sparkled with commendations and community service awards. Parents felt safe when Hale patrolled their neighborhoods. Officers respected his tactical knowledge, and the sheriff relied on him for sensitive operations. But what happens when the people you trust most become the ones you should fear? What signs do we miss when authority transforms into tyranny? These questions would haunt Ceniza County as the truth slowly emerged about what really happened behind those badge numbers and official reports. The trouble began with what seemed like routine police work: property seizures, wellness checks, traffic stops, all documented in official reports, all following proper procedures, or so it appeared. Yara Ledesma lived 3 houses down from the Sosas, a retired teacher whose husband had passed 2 years prior. On a quiet Tuesday evening, she would become the first domino in a chain reaction that would expose corruption reaching the highest levels of county government. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were working against you the entire time? Share your experiences in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to True Crime Speaks, because the stories that matter most are often the ones that hit closest to home. The official records tell one story. The truth tells another. October 15 started like any other Tuesday in Ceniza County. Yara Ledesma was watering her garden when Deputy Hale's patrol car pulled into her driveway. The body cam footage shows him approaching with practiced concern, explaining that a neighbor had called about unusual activity at her residence. "Just checking on you, ma'am. Making sure everything's okay." Yara invited him inside, grateful for what she believed was genuine community policing. The deputy's report would later state she appeared disoriented and potentially unsafe, justify his decision to temporarily secure her registered handgun for her protection. But here's where the official story gets interesting. The body cam recording shows 7 minutes of continuous footage, then suddenly cuts to static when the video resumes. Deputy Hale is walking to a patrol car carrying a small evidence box. 7 minutes of missing footage. 7 minutes with no official explanation. Pilar Sosa received a copy of the incident report 3 days later. Not because she requested it, but because Yara asked her to review the confusing paperwork. What Pilar found sent ice through her veins. The timestamps were out of sequence. Property descriptions were blacked out under privacy redactions. Most disturbing of all, the report claimed Yara had voluntarily surrendered the weapon, despite bodycam audio clearly capturing her asking, "When can I get it back?" Something wasn't right. Pilar would later tell Texas Rangers, "In 30 years of community advocacy, I'd never seen such sloppy police work." Or maybe it wasn't sloppy at all. The weapon disappeared from the county evidence room. Within a week, the property clerk's log showed it was destroyed per standard protocol. But county policy required a 90-day holding period for voluntarily surrender firearms. Standard protocol or deliberate destruction of evidence? When Pilar contacted the county clerk's office requesting additional documentation, she discovered something even more troubling. Yara's case wasn't isolated. Over the previous 18 months, Deputy Hale had conducted 47 wellness checks in their neighborhood. 31 resulted in property seizures. 0 resulted in returned property. Think about that for a moment. 47 visits to check on community members' well-being. 31 families lost property. 0 got their belongings back. How does a wellness check become theft? How does community policing become community predation? These questions would keep Pilar awake at night, scrolling through public records and connecting that painted an increasingly dark picture of the department she had once trusted. But Yara's case was just beginning. The real nightmare was about to target Pilar's own family. What would you do if you discovered your local law enforcement was systematically targeting your neighbors? Would you speak up, or would you stay silent to protect yourself? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed to True Crime Speaks, because this story gets much worse before it gets better. November 3rd marked the day the Sosa family transformed from concerned citizens to active targets. Mateo was driving home from a job site when Deputy Hale's patrol lights flashed in his rear view mirror. The traffic stop seemed routine, until it wasn't. "Sir, we receive reports of suspicious travel patterns in this area. I'm going to need to search your vehicle." Mateo had driven this route for 15 years. Same time, same path, same destination. Nothing suspicious about a construction worker heading home after a 12-hour day. But Deputy Hale's body cam tells a different story than his official report. The audio captures Mateo's confusion. "Suspicious travel? I live here, officer. This is my neighborhood." "Step out of the vehicle, sir." What happened next would become a pattern repeated across Ceniza County. Deputy Hale discovered an envelope containing $1,847 in cash, Mateo's weekly payroll for his crew, money he was taking to the bank the following morning. Small business owners know this routine. Cash flow means survival. But according to Deputy Hale's report, carrying cash constituted evidence of potential drug trafficking activity. Civil asset forfeiture laws in Texas allow law enforcement to seize money and property suspected of being connected to criminal activity. No conviction required. No trial necessary. Just suspicion. Mateo never got his money back. The harassment escalated quickly after that. Within 2 weeks, the Sosa family received 4 different citations. A trash bin allegedly placed too close to the street, though their neighbor's identical placement went unnoticed. A permit violation for Mateo's work truck parked in his own driveway, a truck that had been parked there for 3 years without issue. A noise complaint filed at 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday for construction equipment operation, equipment that wasn't even running. Each citation carried a fine. Each fine required a court appearance. Each court appearance meant lost work time and mounting legal costs. They were bleeding us dry, Pilar recalled in her statement to Texas Rangers. Every week brought a new charge, a new fine, a new reason to make our lives miserable. But the psychological warfare was just beginning. Ring camera footage from the Sosa home shows patrol cars conducting directed patrols outside their house. Not once or twice, but 17 documented times between November 3rd and November 30th. The cars arrived between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., idle for 20 to 30 minutes, then disappear. No reports were filed. No incidents were documented. No explanations were given. Sleep deprivation became a weapon. Stress became a strategy. Fear became the goal. Layla started recording everything. As a criminal justice student, she understood the importance of documentation. Her phone captured license plates, timestamps, and badge numbers. Her academic training told her this was systematic harassment. Her instincts told her it would only get worse. She was right. The final straw came when Pilar received a phone call at work. The caller identified himself as Deputy Rodriguez and claimed there was an emergency at her home requiring immediate attention. Pilar raced home to find nothing wrong, no officers present, and no record of any emergency call in the dispatch logs. They were testing response times, Texas Ranger Eloy Navarro would later explain. Psychological operations designed to create fear and uncertainty. Classic harassment tactics. When authority figures abuse their power, where do you turn for help? Who watches the watchers? These questions plagued the Sosa family as they realized their local law enforcement had declared war on their basic rights. But Pilar Sosa wasn't the type to surrender quietly. How far would you go to protect your family from corrupt officials? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to True Crime Speaks, because fighting corruption requires courage, and courage requires community support. December brought an unexpected ally to the Sosa family's fight for justice. Noemi Vega had covered county government for the Ceniza Herald for 8 years, developing sources throughout the courthouse and sheriff's department. When whispers about the Sosa family's harassment reached her newsroom, her journalistic instincts kicked into overdrive. Something stunk about the whole situation. Vega would later testify. Good families don't just become targets without reason. Using the Texas Public Information Act, Vega began requesting records that would expose the systematic nature of what was happening in Ceniza County. Her first TPI request sought dispatch logs, property room inventories, and civil asset forfeiture reports for the past 2 years. The sheriff department's response revealed more than they intended. Pages of blackened text, entire sections marked law enforcement sensitive, property logs with missing dates, and altered timestamps. The more they tried to hide, the more obvious their guilt became. But Vega's investigation uncovered something even more troubling than individual harassment cases. The Texas Commission on Jail Standards had issued 3 separate warnings to Ceniza County about compliance failures over the past 18 months. Understaffing ratios that violated state minimums, missing property room documentation, failure to maintain required logs for evidence storage. The jail administrator, Beverly Breyer, had sent increasingly desperate emails to Sheriff Langford requesting additional funding and personnel. Her requests were ignored. "We're operating at 40% of required staffing," one email read. "Property room access controls are compromised. Evidence chain of custody procedures cannot be maintained at current levels." Why would a sheriff ignore state compliance warnings about his own jail? The answer was buried in the property seizure records that Vega eventually obtained through a Freedom of Information lawsuit. Over $300,000 in seized cash and property had disappeared from county records in the past 2 years. Weapons, vehicles, cash, jewelry, all taken during suspicious activity stops, all documented as destroyed per protocol, all vanishing without proper chain of custody documentation. The pattern was unmistakable. Target families with harassment, conduct pretextual stops, seize property under civil forfeiture laws, destroy evidence of the seizures, pocket the proceeds. But this wasn't just about money. It was about power. Vega's investigation revealed that most targeted families shared certain characteristics. They were politically active. They questioned local government decisions. They advocated for transparency. They were perceived as threats to the existing power structure. The Sosa family fit the profile perfectly. Pilar's advocacy work, her voting record, her willingness to challenge authority, all of it made her a target in Sheriff Langford's view of order and control. Civil asset forfeiture was the weapon. Harassment was the strategy. Silence was the goal. They wanted to break us financially and psychologically. Pilar explained to reporters, make us too afraid and too broke to keep asking questions. But their plan had one fatal flaw. They underestimated the power of public records and investigative journalism. When Vega's first article hit the Herald's front page, County Sheriff's Office faces questions over missing property. Phone calls started pouring in from other families who had experienced similar harassment. The Hernandez family, the Morales family, the Gutierrez family. The same pattern repeated across the county. Wellness checks that became seizures. Traffic stops that became thefts. Directed patrols that became psychological warfare. Have you ever witnessed government corruption in your community? Did you speak up, or did fear keep you silent? The comment section is where we build courage together. So share your experiences, and don't forget to subscribe to True Crime Speaks, because sunlight remains the best disinfectant for corruption. The sheriff's office was about to learn that some battles can't be won in the shadows. The monthly county commissioners meeting on December 15th was typically attended by fewer than a dozen residents. That morning, over 200 people packed the courthouse square. Folding chairs faced a makeshift stage beneath the century-old clock tower, where Sheriff Langford had agreed to address what his office called recent misunderstandings about standard law enforcement procedures. The crowd told a different story. Families held handwritten signs reading "Where's my property?" and "Accountability now." Noemi Vega positioned herself in the front row, recorder running. Pilar Sosa sat with Layla, both carrying thick folders of documentation. Sheriff Langford took the microphone with his practiced campaign smile, launching into prepared remarks about community safety and the challenges of modern policing. "I want to assure everyone that this department operates with the highest standards of professionalism and integrity," he declared, his voice carrying the authority of 23 years in office. That's when Vega raised her hand. "Sheriff Langford, can you explain why property seizure logs show over $300,000 in missing documentation over the past 2 years? The smile faltered for just a moment. "I don't discuss ongoing internal audits in public forums, Noemi. You know better than that. What about the TCJS violations? 3 separate warnings about compliance failures." Langford's jaw tightened. "The Texas Commission on Jail Standards works closely with our office to address any administrative concerns. We have full cooperation." Layla Sosa stood up, her voice cutting through the political double talk with the precision of someone who had studied constitutional law. "Sheriff, I'm a criminal justice student, and I've reviewed 47 wellness check reports from your department. 31 resulted in property seizures. 0 resulted in returned property. Can you explain how wellness checks became seizure operations?" The courthouse square fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Langford's practiced composure cracked. His voice rose, defensive and sharp. "Young lady, we don't litigate sensitive law enforcement matters in public. There are proper channels for complaints, and this isn't one of them." "What proper channels?" Pilar Sosa called out, rising to stand beside her daughter. "Internal affairs complaints that disappear, phone calls that go unreturned, TPI requests that come back blacked out." Applause began in the back rows and spread forward like wildfire. Langford gripped the microphone tighter, his political instincts warring with his growing anger. "This meeting is about community safety, not conspiracy theories from disgruntled citizens who don't understand law enforcement procedures." But the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. 23 years of assumed trust evaporated under the weight of documented evidence and shared experiences. Family after family began standing up, adding their voices to the growing chorus of accountability demands. Sheriff Langford left the stage after 15 minutes, refusing to answer additional questions. But the damage was done. The wall of silence protecting his operation had cracked. And cracks have a way of spreading. Were you surprised that it took this long for the community to organize? What does it take for people to overcome their fear of authority? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to True Crime Speaks, because democracy only works when citizens demand better. 3 days after the courthouse confrontation, Pilar Sosa made the phone call that would change everything. Texas Ranger Eloy Navarro had built his reputation investigating public corruption across the state's rural counties. With 26 years of experience and a law degree from UT, he understood both the complexities of small-town politics and the federal statutes that applied when local officials violated civil rights under color of law. "Ma'am, I've been following the news coverage from Suniza County, Ranger Navarro said when Pilar reached him at the Austin field office. "Why don't you tell me exactly what's been happening down there?" The conversation lasted 2 hours. Pilar walked him through every incident, every document, every piece of evidence her family had compiled. Navarro took notes in his characteristic precise handwriting, asking questions that revealed his deep understanding of both criminal law and constitutional violations. "Mrs. Sosa, what you're describing sounds like a systematic pattern of civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. The federal penalties for that are severe." Within 48 hours, Ranger Navarro was in Ceniza County, conducting what he called preliminary interviews with affected families. His rental car was unremarkable, his questions were careful, and his presence was deliberately low-key. But Sheriff Langford noticed anyway. The harassment of the Sosa family intensified immediately. Ring camera footage from December 20th shows a patrol car arriving at 3:17 a.m., idling outside their home for 37 minutes. The next night, same time, 42 minutes. The pattern continued for a week. Pilar called Ranger Navarro. "They know you're here. They're escalating." "I was hoping they'd be smarter than that," Navarro replied. But criminal overconfidence often works in our favor. The ranger advised Pilar to document everything and consider applying for a protective order through the district court. More importantly, he explained the process that was about to unfold. When local law enforcement becomes a problem, Texas law provides specific remedies. The district attorney will likely need to recuse himself due to his working relationship with the sheriff's department. A special prosecutor from outside the county will be appointed. The Texas Rangers will conduct the criminal investigation. By January 3rd, District Attorney Roberto Flores had indeed recused himself from any matters involving the sheriff's department. Judge Patricia Hendricks appointed Special Prosecutor Martinez from neighboring Guadalupe County to handle what court documents described as allegations of official misconduct and civil rights violations. The appointment triggered a cascade of legal mechanisms designed to ensure accountability when local officials go rogue. Ranger Navarro's investigation expanded beyond individual harassment cases to examine the systemic corruption that enabled them. Federal bank records showed unexplained cash deposits to accounts controlled by Sheriff Langford and Deputy Hale. Audit trails revealed property seizures that never appeared in official logs. Phone records connected the two men to a network of contacts that suggested an organized criminal enterprise. But the most damaging evidence was yet to come. The protective order hearing on January 10th lasted 3 hours. Judge Hendricks reviewed ring camera footage, dispatch logs, and testimony from multiple families. Her ruling was swift and comprehensive. Based on clear and convincing evidence of systematic harassment and intimidation, this court grants a temporary ex parte protective order prohibiting any member of the Ceniza County Sheriff's Office from conducting non-emergency contact with the Sosa family or their property. The order specifically banned directed patrols, pretextual traffic stops, and any law enforcement contact not related to imminent threats to public safety. For the first time in months, the Sosa family slept through the night without patrol cars circling their home. But Sheriff Langford wasn't finished. His next move will provide the evidence that sealed his fate. What happens when corrupt officials realize they're being investigated? Do they back down? Or do they double down on their criminal behavior? Tell us what you think in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to True Crime Speaks, because this case is about to explode. Sheriff Langford's response to protective order revealed the desperation of a man watching his criminal empire collapse. On January 15th at 11:23 p.m., Ceniza County Dispatch received a 911 call reporting suspicious activity at the Sosa residence. The caller claimed to have witnessed individuals in dark clothing moving around the property, suggesting possible burglary in progress. Deputy Hale responded within 6 minutes, using the emergency call as justification to violate the protective order. His patrol car's dashcam recorded him conducting a thorough perimeter search with his flashlight, systematically checking windows and doors while the family slept inside. Ring camera footage captured the entire event from multiple angles. More importantly, it captured audio of Deputy Hale making the original 911 call from his patrol car 3 blocks away. Special Prosecutor Martinez had ordered voice analysis on all communications related to the case. The forensic audio lab at the Department of Public Safety compared the 911 recording with Deputy Hale's body cam audio from previous traffic stops. The voice prints matched perfectly. Dr. Angela Restrepo, the forensic audio specialist who conducted the analysis, would later testify that the probability of 2 different speakers producing identical voice patterns was less than 1 in 50 million. Deputy Hale had fabricated the emergency call to justify violating protective order, but that wasn't the only evidence mounting against the sheriff's department. Texas Ranger Navarro's financial investigation had uncovered a complex money laundering scheme involving seized property and cash. Bank records showed that Sheriff Langford had opened 3 separate accounts under his wife's maiden name, receiving regular cash deposits that totaled over $180,000 during the past 18 months. The timing of deposits correlated precisely with major property seizures documented in official reports. Seizures that were later marked as destroyed per protocol to eliminate evidence of their existence. Deputy Hale's financial records told a similar story. Cash deposits, new truck purchase, home improvements, and a fishing boat bought with cash, all financed by what appeared to be systematic theft under color of law. Jail Administrator Beverly Breyer provided the investigation's most damaging testimony during her interview with Ranger Navarro. Faced with potential charges for her own compliance failures, she cooperated fully with investigators. Sheriff Langford ordered me to stop maintaining proper chain of custody logs for evidence storage, she revealed. He said it was administrative streamlining, but I knew what he really meant. Breyer had kept copies of her emails requesting additional staff and proper procedures. Her documentation showed a clear pattern of Sheriff Langford ordering violations of state jail standards to facilitate the systematic theft of seized property. More importantly, Breyer had installed security cameras in the evidence room without Sheriff Langford's knowledge, fearing that she would be blamed for missing property. The footage showed both Sheriff Langford and Deputy Hale removing items from evidence storage without proper documentation on multiple occasions. The investigation expanded as more families came forward with similar experiences. The Valdez family had lost $3,200 during a suspicious travel stop. The Paredes family's ATV was seized during a welfare check and later listed as destroyed. The Rodriguez family's jewelry disappeared after a domestic disturbance call that neighbor confirmed never actually involved any disturbance. Each case followed the same pattern: pretextual law enforcement contact, property seizure under questionable circumstances, immediate destruction of evidence to prevent recovery. Special Prosecutor Martinez calculated that at least 40 families have been targeted over the past 3 years, with total losses exceeding $800,000 in cash and property. But the most serious charges weren't about theft. They were about constitutional violations. 18 U.S.C. 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment when the violation results in death and up to 10 years for other violations. Each instance of harassment, each fabricated traffic stop, each unlawful seizure constituted a separate federal felony. 18 U.S.C. 1951. The Hobbs Act criminalizes robbery and extortion affecting interstate commerce. Sheriff Langford's systematic theft of property from travelers definitely qualified. 18 U.S.C. 371. Conspiracy charges applied to the coordinated criminal enterprise operating under the Sheriff Department's authority. The evidence was overwhelming. The charges were federal. The penalties were severe. Have you ever wondered how corruption spreads through institutions that are supposed to protect us? What warning signs should communities watch for? Share your observations in the comments and subscribe to True Crime Speaks, because understanding corruption is the first step to preventing it. February 8th marked the beginning of the end for Sheriff Langford's criminal enterprise. The federal grand jury convened in the San Antonio courthouse. 23 citizens sworn to determine whether sufficient evidence existed to indict the Ceniza County officials for civil rights violations and organized criminal activity. Special Prosecutor Martinez had assembled a case that spanned 3 years of systematic corruption. FBI forensic accountants testified about the money laundering scheme. Audio specialists demonstrated the voice print evidence, proving Deputy Hale had fabricated emergency calls. Texas Rangers presented thousands of documents showing the pattern of harassment and property theft. But the most powerful testimony came from the families themselves. Pilar Sosa spent 4 hours detailing her family's harassment, supported by Ring camera footage, dispatch logs, and financial records showing the mounting costs of defending against fraudulent citations. Her testimony was calm, factual, and devastating. Layla Sosa testified about the psychological warfare tactics used against her family, explaining how directed patrols and fake emergency calls were designed to create fear and compliance. Her criminal justice education gave her testimony additional credibility with the grand jurors. Beverly Breyer, the jail administrator, provided insider testimony about how Sheriff Langford ordered violations of state compliance standards to facilitate property theft. Her security camera footage showed both defendants removing evidence from storage without proper documentation. The grand jury also heard from forensic experts who had analyzed seized property that was supposedly destroyed per protocol. Chemical residue testing on storage containers revealed that many items had been removed recently, not destroyed months earlier as claimed in official reports. Dr. Patricia Walsh, a forensic psychologist who specialized in abuse of power cases, testified about the systematic nature of the harassment campaign. She explained how targeting politically active families served to intimidate the entire community and maintain corrupt officials' control over local government. This wasn't random criminal behavior, Dr. Walsh explained. This was calculated psychological warfare designed to silence opposition and maintain power through fear. Perhaps most damaging was a testimony from 3 other county employees who had witnessed the criminal activity but remained silent until granted immunity by federal prosecutors. Dispatch Supervisor Maria Santos testified about being ordered to alter radio logs and delete recordings related to the harassment campaign. Property clerk Duncan Torres admitted to falsifying destruction certificates for items that were actually removed by Sheriff Langford and Deputy Hale. Records clerk Veronica Ibarra revealed that she had been instructed to heavily redact public information requests and delay responses to prevent families from obtaining evidence of the harassment. Each witness painted the same picture: a systematic criminal enterprise operating under law enforcement authority, designed to enrich corrupt officials while intimidating anyone who might expose their activities. After 6 days of testimony and deliberation, the grand jury returned its decision: 18 separate federal indictments against Sheriff Langford and Deputy Hale, ranging from civil rights violations to money laundering to conspiracy charges. The maximum combined penalty exceeded 200 years in federal prison. Do you think corruption like this is more common than we realize? How many other communities might be dealing with similar abuse of power? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to True Crime Speaks, because accountability requires all of us to stay vigilant. While federal charges work their way through the court system, Texas state law provided an additional mechanism for accountability that moved much faster. Chapter 87 of the Texas Local Government Code allows for the judicial removal of county officials who engage in official misconduct. Unlike criminal trials that require proof beyond reasonable doubt, removal proceedings only require clear and convincing evidence of misconduct incompatible with public office. Local attorney Fernando Aguilar filed the removal petition on behalf of concerned citizens, citing the federal indictments and overwhelming evidence of systematic corruption. Judge Patricia Hendricks scheduled the hearing for March 15th, giving both sides 30 days to prepare their cases. Sheriff Langford hired expensive criminal defense attorneys from Houston, but their strategy revealed the weakness of his position. Rather than denying the evidence, they argued that the misconduct wasn't severe enough to justify removal from office. My client may have made administrative errors, defense attorney Ricardo Velasquez argued during opening statements, but administrative errors don't constitute grounds for removal under Chapter 87. Special Prosecutor Martinez, handling both the criminal case and the removal proceeding, responded with exhibits that filled 3 tables in the courtroom: bank records showing unexplained cash deposits, security camera footage of evidence theft, voice analysis proving fabricated emergency calls, testimony from 43 affected families, financial audits revealing over $800,000 in missing property. The hearing lasted 5 days, with testimony from law enforcement experts, forensic specialists, and community members whose lives have been shattered by the harassment campaign. Dr. Rebecca Torres, a former FBI agent who specialized in public corruption cases, testified about the sophisticated nature of the criminal enterprise operating in Suniza County. This wasn't opportunistic theft, she explained to the judge. This was an organized, systematic program of extortion and intimidation designed to enrich corrupt officials while silencing political opposition. Texas Ranger Navarro testified about similar corruption cases he had investigated across rural Texas, explaining how Sheriff Langford's operation was particularly sophisticated in its use of civil asset forfeiture laws to legitimize what was essentially organized theft. But the most compelling testimony came from the families themselves, who described the devastating impact of living under systematic harassment by their own law enforcement officials. Yara Ledesma, the elderly teacher whose wellness check had started the investigation, testified with quiet dignity about losing her husband's service weapon and feeling unsafe in her own home. Mateo Sosa described the financial strain of fighting fraudulent citations while losing his construction business payroll to civil forfeiture. His voice broke when he explained how the harassment had affected his daughter's studies and his wife's health. "They didn't just steal our money," he told the judge. "They stole our sense of security, our trust in government, our belief that justice exists in America." Sheriff Langford's defense offered no credible alternative explanation for the evidence. Their cross-examinations revealed desperation rather than legitimate legal strategy, attacking victims rather than addressing the mountain of documented proof. On March 20th, Judge Hendricks delivered her ruling from the bench, reading for 23 minutes from findings of fact that systematically destroyed every aspect of the defense's case. The evidence clearly and convincingly establishes that Sheriff Langford engaged in official misconduct that violated his oath of office, betrayed the public trust, and rendered him unfit to continue serving as a law enforcement officer in the state of Texas. The judge's order was immediate and comprehensive. Sheriff Langford was removed from office, banned from holding any law enforcement position in Texas, and ordered to surrender his Coles certification. Deputy Hale had already resigned and fled the county, but his Coles certification was also revoked, placing him on the Brady/Giglio list that would prevent him from testifying in any criminal case. Can you imagine living under this kind of systematic harassment? How do communities recover from betrayal by the people sworn to protect them? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to True Crime Speaks, because healing requires acknowledging the truth. 6 months after Judge Hendricks removed Sheriff Langford from office, Suniza County began the difficult process of rebuilding trust in its law enforcement institutions. Interim Sheriff Patricia Moreno, a 20-year veteran of the Texas Department of Public Safety, implemented comprehensive reforms designed to prevent future corruption. Body cameras became mandatory for all interactions. Property room access required 2-officer authorization. Financial audits became quarterly rather than annual. Most importantly, she established a citizen oversight committee with subpoena power and direct access to all department records. The federal criminal trial concluded in October with both Langford and Hale pleading guilty to conspiracy and civil rights violations in exchange for reduced sentences. Langford received 12 years in federal prison. Hale received 8 years. More importantly, they were ordered to pay $847,000 in restitution to affected families, money that was recovered from hidden bank accounts and seized assets during the investigation. The psychological healing took longer than the legal resolution. Dr. Maria Gonzalez, a trauma counselor who worked with affected families, explained that systematic harassment by authority figures creates unique psychological damage that can take years to resolve. When the people you trust to protect you become the people you need protection from, it fundamentally changes how you see the world, she noted. Recovery requires rebuilding faith in institutions, and that happens one positive interaction at a time. Pilar Sosa became a statewide advocate for law enforcement accountability, testifying before the Texas legislature about the need for stronger oversight mechanisms and whistleblower protections. Her daughter Layla changed her major from criminal justice to law, determined to prosecute corrupt officials rather than work within a system she had seen abused. The Suniza Herald won a state journalism award for Noemi Vega's investigation, and her series on rural corruption was picked up by newspapers across Texas. leading to similar investigations in 3 other counties. Perhaps most importantly, the community learned that democracy requires active participation to survive. Voter turnout in the next sheriff's election reached 78%, the highest in county history. Corruption thrives in darkness and dies in sunlight. Pilar reflected during a community forum 6 months after the trials concluded. But sunlight requires citizens who are willing to turn on the lights. The case also led to legislative changes. The Texas legislature strengthened civil asset forfeiture requirements, increased penalties for official oppression, and expanded the Texas Rangers' jurisdiction over local law enforcement corruption. What lessons do you take from this case? How can communities protect themselves from corrupt officials? Tell us in the comments and subscribe to True Crime Speaks, because the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. The Ceniza County case reveals uncomfortable truths about power, corruption, and fragility of our democratic institutions. Sheriff Langford didn't become corrupt overnight. He built his criminal enterprise gradually, testing boundaries and exploiting the community's trust over decades. Each unchallenged abuse of power made the next violation easier to justify. The families he targeted weren't chosen randomly. They were politically active, asking difficult questions, demanding transparency. In other words, they were doing exactly what citizens should do in a democracy, holding their government accountable. But this story also demonstrates the strength of our legal system when it functions as designed. Federal civil rights laws protected families when local institutions failed. Texas Rangers provided independent investigation when local law enforcement was compromised. Special prosecutors ensured justice when conflicts of interest prevented local accountability. Most importantly, ordinary citizens refused to be intimidated into silence. Pilar Sosa could have remained quiet after the first harassment incident. Noemi Vega could have ignored the story when it seemed too controversial. Texas Ranger Navarro could have dismissed complaints from a small rural county. Instead, each person chose courage over comfort, truth over convenience. The question isn't whether corruption exists in your community. It's whether you'll recognize it and act when you see it. Are local officials transparent about their activities? Do they welcome questions or deflect them? Are public records easily accessible or heavily redacted? Do certain families seem to face unusual scrutiny from law enforcement? These warning signs exist in communities across America. The difference between Ceniza County's corruption and accountability was citizen engagement. Democracy isn't a spectator sport. It requires participation, vigilance, and the courage to speak truth to power when necessary. What will you do when that moment comes in your community? Thank you for watching True Crime Speaks. If this story opened your eyes to the importance of accountability, please like this video, share it with friends who need to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter. Because in the end, justice depends on all of us.